Welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast, a podcast for everyone with an entrepreneurial spirit. I am joined by successful guests in all different industries and stages of business who will share what their experience was like transitioning from employee to boss. This is a resource for you if you're wanting to start a business, go all in on your side hustle, get to the next level in your thriving business, or just hear what it's like taking the leap to becoming your own boss. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast production agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. Let's dive into today's topic. Hey, Jessie, thank you so much for joining me on the Employee to Boss podcast. I am so thrilled to be talking with you today.
Me too. So excited for our conversation.
Yes, so we're going to be talking all about venture capital funds, gender equity, and just all these things that I think entrepreneurs need to learn about. And it's not often talked about, at least in the circles that I run in. So I am really excited to learn from you today. If you wanted to start off by just telling us about your background and what you do, I'd love to learn more.
When I graduated from college, I thought I was going to be an economist. So I did some economic consulting and worked at a think tank and thought I was going to go and get my PhD and realized that this is the benefit of work experience, right? You work in the industry and you realize, hey, this is not a fit for me. I don't want to spend the next 4 to 6 years of my life writing a thesis. And so my best girlfriend at the time was a lawyer, and I thought, that sounds good. So, I mean, if I'm being honest, like that's how it ended up happening. Went to law school, thought had a great time, really fun, really interesting, and then went to work in New York at a major law firm. Major one of these massive corporate law firms that works with IBM and, these massive tech and tech companies. And stayed there, moved to another firm, left New York, came back to New York, and my last big law job was I was running the investment funds team, which is, investment funds or venture capital funds, private equity funds, hedge funds. I had launched and was running that team at a big law firm in New York. And for lots of reasons that your listeners can probably relate to, that you can relate to, sometimes that you realize that a certain setting doesn't suit you. And maybe you've realized it for a long time, but it took you a while to get up the courage to leave. And it was actually a number of my clients who were women fund managers who suggested I leave and start my own firm. So here I am. In October 2020, I left my big law job and launched my own firm, which is All Places. It comes from a quote from Justice Ginsburg, which is that women belong in all places where decisions are being made. And we are really, we are a corporate law firm, but we also have a mission, which is really around creating more gender equity in capital markets. So more gender equity when we're talking about who is raising money, who's managing money, like who's getting money into their business. So that's the mission behind our basic corporate law structure.
I absolutely love that. That gave me chills just thinking
Thank
about
you.
that. I mean, yeah, like we were talking about right before we got on this call, it's important to make sure that our businesses match our values and match, who we are. So I love that that's the name of your business and how you came up with it. It definitely, you know, stands out in such a male-dominated world. And like you said, you work with men, but a lot of the people you work with are women, correct?
That's right. And similar to you, right? When we created the brand, we worked with this amazing agency called Outset that mostly does these big consumer companies. And they worked with us on the branding. And, people go to our website, you'll see it looks very different than a traditional law firm website. The feel is different. It's beautiful. It's warm. It's a little more, I guess you'd say, stereotypically feminine. So what we're trying to communicate is to women who don't always have the best experiences working with big law firms. We want you, we're about you. We are a different type of legal environment. And that type of legal environment attracts some men too, who are
Mhm.
like, oh, we want an amazing experience without all this like bullshit
Yeah.
around like posturing and being overly aggressive and, overly argumentative when it's not very valuable. People who want want to have just like a really nice relationship with their
Absolutely.
lawyers. And there are a
Absolutely.
lot of men who care about gender equity. Mostly it's women.
Yeah.
But there's the men out there too who think it's important, we love our male clients.
I love
Just
that.
like we love our female clients. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
We love all of our clients, right?
Yes. Yes, if we don't love them, the benefit of being your own boss, running your own company, is you can fire the ones you don't like,
That's so true. That is so true. Oh
and
my
that
god.
feels good.
It does,
Yeah.
it does. And I mean,
Scary. Scary, but good.
yeah, it just helps to feel aligned with all of your clients definitely because then you give them the best. I mean, we're people. We'll even if I don't love working with someone, like I'll still put in effort, but I know myself and why I only work with clients that I absolutely love their mission that they're on is because then I put in my best work and you know, they might not see a difference, but I do for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it too is we wanna work with companies that really value what we do.
Yeah.
So companies that really see the value in our unique approach to how
Mhm.
we provide services, and if they don't see the value in it, then that's okay, but we're probably not the right fit for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, tell us more about your journey from employee to boss. So, when you decided that you were going to go off and start your own business, what steps did you take to get there?
I never planned to be an entrepreneur, so this was not one of those. I knew it eventually. Is where I was going. I financially, I'm very risk averse, so I grew up
Mm.
with a lot of financial insecurity. So the idea of leaving this, relatively cushy job as a partner in a big law firm with a very regular, dependable salary was not something that I'd really anticipated. But what happened for me, which, I hear a similar story a lot from people. Usually it's some very decisive event in your life that makes you rethink your work life, a
Mhm.
decisive event in your personal life. So for me, my father died, and he died very suddenly, and it really, hit me hard. And it happened actually shortly before I had this big event planned with all of these women fund managers. And I decided to go through with the event. And it was that night that a number of the women sitting around this table told me I should start my own firm. And it's definitely not emotionally in a place to do that at the time. But it stuck with me a little bit, and I just started thinking about it a little bit more, talking to my family, talking to my husband, talking to some very close friends, trying it on for size. If I did it, what would it look like? And then I made the decision so that was in July of 2019. And in January 2020, just everything seemed to be pushing me in that direction. I just, sometimes when you make a decision or you're toying with a decision, it feels like the forces conspire
Mhm.
to push you in that direction. So there are just a number of things where I was like, oh, I think this is what I have to do. I don't actually feel fully valued where I am now. I don't think I can affect the culture where I am now. I don't think I can turn this job or any similar job into my dream job. And then one of the first concrete steps I took was I started working with a coach.
Yeah.
And that was made a really big difference for me. That made a really big difference for me because it's very easy, to have this a lot of people have this idea, oh, I think maybe I'll start this business. But it's very hard to motivate yourself and to feel like you have even a good idea of what you should be doing, right?
Right.
What steps should I be doing? What if I do this and that's a total waste of time? So for me, working with a coach, gave me kind of guided me more towards the more concrete steps and made it feel doable.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, I love being in a room with women who just kind of like build you up and even in that hard place. I'm sorry to hear about your father.
When I look back on it and when I get asked that question, like what prompted me to do
Mhm.
this, my father was also my biggest like business supporter. So he was a small business consultant. And most of my conversations around business, around being a partner, around being a lawyer were with him.
Mhm.
So yeah, a lot of the little pieces kind of came
Yeah,
together.
just came
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
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 If they had said that to me at a dinner and I hadn't just lost my dad, I'm sure I would have reacted differently. I would have been
For
like,
sure.
oh yeah, but when you go through something significant like that, losing a parent or a job or a
Mhm.
friend or whatever it is, your mentality just shifts a little bit. You become
Absolutely.
maybe open to some things that you wouldn't have been open to before.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. So I'd love to get into venture capital funds, all your education on this, and really a lot of the listeners are newer in business. So I'm curious, what are the first steps to starting a venture capital fund?
Yeah, let's talk about, so let me say, why don't I just say first what a venture capital fund is,
Yes,
which
please.
is such a normal thing to not know what it is. So a venture capital fund is, uh, say I'm a venture capitalist. What I do is I go out and I raise a bunch of money from people. So say I'm raising $100 million fund. I go out and raise a bunch of money from people and say, hey, if you commit this money to me, I am then going to make decisions about how this money gets invested in private companies. So not big public companies like, Intel, but
Hmm.
in privately held companies. And then I'm going to make those decisions. I'm going to invest that money for you. And then if those investments go well, then I'm going to give that money back to you. So that's essentially it. And then the difference between a venture capital fund and, say, a private equity fund is venture capital funds tend to invest pretty early, and they tend to invest in a way that is, they tend to invest in minority positions. So it's not like, to use like a dated reference now, it's not like Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, where he goes out and takes over a company and buys it and
Hmm.
restructures it. It's not like that. It's a small investment to say, here's capital for you to help with your business. I'm not taking it over. I'm just giving you this money because I think you need it to grow. So how do people start venture capital funds? You have to have a thesis, right?
Hmm.
So why is it that you are uniquely capable of choosing the right companies, getting access to their fundraising rounds, and then helping them grow? Like, what is unique and special about you and your team that you can do that? And then the other thing is you then have to go out and raise all this money. And it's a lot of money. Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot of money. And it's a lot of money people are giving to you with a huge amount of trust,
Yeah.
because they're like, here's my money. You make decisions. I may or may not see it ever.
Hmm.
And if I do see it, it's probably not going to be for a long time, because you're investing in these companies that are pretty young. It's going to take a long time before I get my money back.
Right.
So it's a huge, huge undertaking. And maybe another piece that's probably maybe more relevant to some of the people, some of your community, is how do venture capital funds then invest
Yeah.
in businesses?
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk about that?
I would love
Is
that.
that
Yeah.
on the list?
Yes. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking, raising money, it's hard because I'm a service provider, right? So the
Yep.
way I make money in my business is through clients working with me.
Yep.
But this is a whole nother thing where someone would be giving me money, right? And so then I would have to build that up, build my business up, and then figure out how to get that money back to them. And I'm sure that's why people work with you, because you're the lawyer with all the details and all of those things. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that I hear from our clients a lot is that they appreciate that we are not just like, here's your stack of documents kind of
Mhm.
lawyers, where
Mhm.
let's talk through the process a little
Yes.
bit in a way
Mhm.
that hopefully makes it understandable. Because if you've never raised money before, like, why would you know how to do it?
You're right.
Why would you know what the options are?
Yeah.
Why would you know what terms matter?
Other
Like,
than, like, a bake sale in middle school, that's probably the last time I've raised money.
great, great. But similar to what you're doing now, right? You're like, I have
Mhm.
this product and I'm
Yep.
selling it to you. So I think maybe to back it up a little bit, so you have your business and I have my business, and neither of us have raised money from anybody else, right? We've financed our businesses, built them. It's a little different with service businesses because there is some cash flow coming in.
Mhm.
But even with our businesses, there could come a point where like a little extra capital could be helpful.
Yeah.
Say you want to expand the team, expand your services, expand your geographical reach, expand, your studio, expand your technology. There are things that money can be really helpful for. And sometimes you want to invest in those things before you actually have the cash flow to support it. Right? I thought about this for our business. It's something we still think about. So in our case, though, we're probably not a target for venture capital, because we're not looking to, like, give me $1 million and I'm going to turn it into $10 million
Right.
for you. Right? We are more of like a slow and steady growth. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not like this,
Right.
but it's also not like this.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's not as scalable as some product-based businesses. So for us, if we're thinking about this, what we think about are small business loans and lines of credit. Like we're a business that has cash flow, we can go to a bank and apply for a small business loan that we would then have to pay back, but that bank then doesn't own our company,
Hmm.
right? I would still be a 100% owner. You would still be 100% owner of your business, but you'd have to pay that money back to the bank. That's how it works for most companies, most small businesses. Then there are other businesses that they really need a lot of money early on in order to create their products and connect to their marketplace. So we can think of this like the stereotypical example is a technology company, right? Where they need a lot of investment up front in actually building the product
Hmm.
before they're ever going to make any money. Or maybe they have like a beta, that we all purchase for like $2.99, a few of us, and then, they get a little bit of revenue, but nothing that could actually cover the cost of creating the product. So for them, they would go out there and say, hey, I need $1 million. I need $10 million. And this is what I'm going to do with that company. It's going to rapidly accelerate our growth.
Hmm.
And this is why you should give it to me. So those are the types of companies that tend to be most appealing to venture capitalists. The ones that say, when you give me this money, it's going to dramatically transform my business. So that's it's a pretty small community of businesses. But because ventures become this like very sexy field, they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I should raise venture capital. That's what I think most of us think about when you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I need money for my business. I should raise venture capital. You're like, okay, but it's probably only a good fit for like a narrow slice of
Mm.
all the businesses that we run.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It does. It does. And how do you help them decide whether it's for them? I know people that in my community have just recently created products that, are very scalable, right? Someone can just
Hmm.
buy it and then they can scale it from there. So it sounds like that would be a better fit for them rather than someone who is like me and is a podcast manager.
Yeah, I think between those two, someone who's running a service that
Mhm.
isn't tech enabled, like what you do, like what we do,
Yep.
probably not a great we're probably not going to have a lot of luck if we go to a
Yeah.
venture capital fund.
Yeah.
And we probably wouldn't really, that probably money wouldn't probably be great for us anyway, because
Mhm.
we'd then have somebody, an investor, calling us up being like, why aren't you building faster? Why aren't you growing faster? Like, I'm expecting a lot of returns from this.
Yeah. We're already hard enough on ourselves, right? We don't need that.
That is, that is right. I mean, I have this conversation with myself and other people I trust on the regular.
Yeah.
Oh, why aren't we growing more quickly? Why
Yep.
hasn't this happened faster? Why aren't we making more money yet? Like, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. We do that enough ourselves. So then if we let's go to the businesses that are, I have a product, it's scalable. Okay, great. So if you're going to go out and pitch to venture capital funds, what you need is a really compelling story that says, here's my product. Here is why I'm so confident people are going to buy it. And I'm so confident a lot of people are going to buy it. And this is what I'm going to do with your money to accelerate that myself along that trajectory.
Mhm.
And now that's a different conversation if you're talking about someone who's, what's a good example? What's a product you've seen? You're like, oh, okay, I have a friend who's created this type of product. We don't have to be specific, but
I have a friend right now who does, like, custom gifts for like, client gifts, like, custom made, like, wood carved gifts, kind of things like that.
okay, okay, great. So let's take a business like that.
Mhm.
So what your friend needs to do is she'd need to have a really compelling story, right, about how that business, there are so many people who want that product. It's going to be profitable now, but as we scale, it's going to be even more and more profitable.
Mhm.
And what somebody else's money, how much money they need to bring in order to like really hit that massive profitability curve. Now, with a business like that, it's going, actually with any business, it is about how you have, the story you tell has to be true and really compelling,
Mhm.
right? So a lot of people, regardless of what company or what product they have, they come out with a story that's maybe not entirely true and maybe not entirely compelling.
Mm.
So one of the things that, when people ask me, like, what's one of the most important things that somebody can do to increase their odds when they're fundraising, is to really think hard. And you do this, I do this with my business. It's an ongoing thing. It's so much harder than it sounds, but it's to really think hard about what the unique value is of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Why is it so uniquely special and magical that people are going to be like desperate to work with you? And
Mhm.
who are those people? And are there a lot of them? And can they pay you?
Yeah, those are all important questions,
Yeah.
definitely. I think that's a really great way to kind of break it down and explain it to everyone because, yeah, I mean, definitely it is a nice way to figure out if it's for you, if it's not, if that's even something that you should consider. And if it is something that you should consider, you know, another question to you is at what point are most businesses ready for venture capital?
I'd say let's talk about two different types of
Mhm.
businesses. So one, let's talk about this kind of technology business. Every company is technology to some extent, right? Let's
Yeah,
talk about where the product is a type of technology. With that sort of business, you'd probably want to do it relatively early because you're going to need the money early.
right.
But the market's changed a little bit. For a certain period of time, it was like very free flowing with venture capital funds, and now things have constricted a little bit. And
Yeah.
most people want to know that you've sold some products.
Mhm.
Like, do you know that people want this? Has anyone bought your product? So even for that type of company, you want some experience where you're like, you have a basic version of your product and you have some users and you're getting some feedback, you're learning about what they want and whether your product actually fits what they want. With a business, let's take your friend with the gifts business.
Mhm.
With that business, what people want to see is you're in business now, you've already been doing it for a few years, you have sales, you have some information about your client base. So you have some intelligence about them, what they want, what they don't want, how much they're willing to pay, what products they want. And you need that story already before you go out.
Mhm.
And what a lot of venture capitalists are thinking about now is like, what is your cost of goods? Right? So how much does it cost to produce your one unit? So your one gift, how much does it cost to produce that? And how much profit do you have on top of that? And a lot of times, the early stage, you don't have any profit,
Right,
right?
right.
You're operating at a loss. So how are you going to take this outside money and turn that from a loss business into a profit business?
Mm.
So I guess that's all to say. It could be very early. It could be that you need to grow your business on your own organically for a few years, self-funding, before you're ready to go out there and ask for money.
Thank you for breaking that down, that makes a lot of sense. So, another piece of your business is the gender equity, and, it's a critical issue in venture capital and private equity, and that's really what your business brings light to, and like you were saying, how that's why you work with a lot of women, but you also work with a lot of men who care about the gender equity in this industry. So, can you break that down for us too?
Yeah, and I'll separate it from, like, there are lots of ways we can talk about gender equity in business, right? Because most women have been in environments,
Yeah.
and a lot of men too, have been in environments where they feel like, ugh, for lack of,
Yes.
it's just like, ugh,
You're like,
this
"Oh my
doesn't
god."
feel good.
Right.
This makes me uncomfortable. This doesn't feel consistent with my values. I don't feel like I'm being valued. I feel like I'm being talked down to. I feel like I'm being excluded,
Mhm.
all of these things. So let's put that aside. And what I'll focus on is really around the metrics related to capital and money. So when we talk about gender equity in venture and private equity and in venture-backed companies, what we're talking about is, this data around how much money is going to women and how much money is being managed by women. So some of your community may have heard that venture capital funding, less than 2% goes to female-founded businesses.
Wow.
And what that means is that if you have a whole pool, if you have 100 companies and you look at their founders, two of the 100 are led by women,
Mhm.
women only female founders.
Yeah.
And then you have another, say, about 20% that are mixed gender teams. And then you have like almost 80% that are only men. So you can see the inequity there, right?
Yeah.
80% only men, 2% only women.
That's
Something
wild.
is not right there.
Right.
And then if you go up, okay, who's investing? So venture capital funds are investing in these founders. If you look at venture capital funds, right? Private equity funds, all these funds. What percentage of those funds are owned by women? Less than 2%.
Wow.
Same for people of color. Less than 2% of that
Mhm.
money is owned by minority owned firms. Less than 2%.
Wow.
Right? And then you look above that, who is putting their money into these venture capital funds, right? Again, who's making those decisions? And the numbers kind of keep, like, again, you have gender inequity there too. So why does this matter? Like, this matters to businesses that are hoping to receive venture capital funds. This matters to people who are starting venture capital funds. But this also matters, I believe, to our culture more broadly, because people who are in these positions, who are getting funded, who are running venture funds, these are people who are potentially making a lot of money.
Mhm.
So they're building a lot of wealth for themselves. And then on the company side, they're making decisions about who they employ. They're taking that money and they're spending it consistent with their values. So you can see how things might be different if, say, 50% of venture funding went to women. 50% of venture capital funds were owned by women. 50% of the people investing in venture funds were women.
Mhm.
Things might be different. I think things definitely would be different, probably in some ways that we can't totally predict. But this industry is so unique because it kind of filters, its effects spread, because it affects downstream who gets funded, and it affects upstream who makes money.
Mhm.
So what's happening now is that one subset of, the US community is making money, and one subset of the US community is getting funded at a much, much higher rate than all of the other groups.
Oh my gosh, that just blew my mind with those stats. That's I didn't know or didn't realize there was that much, difference between the two, men and women. So what are we doing
Yeah,
about
and why would you, right? Because
Right.
it's not like this. It's not part of our, it's not part of our
Yeah.
conversation around gender and equality.
Yeah.
It's just not a very big part of our conversation, which is too bad, because I think it's a critical part, right? If
Definitely.
you have that kind of inequity when you're talking about managing money, which is money is arguably the most powerful force in this country,
Mhm.
that needs to change. It's hard to imagine culturally us feeling more equitable
Yeah.
when we don't have equity in that particular subset of this
Definitely.
economy.
Definitely. Oh, well,
Yeah.
thanks for bringing light to this. This is
Sure.
absolutely blowing my mind.
Not to
And
be doom and gloom.
I
That's not
know. I
the
mean,
right.
we have to talk about these things. So, what are you doing in your business to change this? I mean, what can any of us do to change this?
I mean, all of us can do something to change
Mhm.
this. And the one thing that all of us can do is we can think of every dollar we spend as being an impact investment,
Mm,
right? So when you go to the grocery store and you're deciding between two different products and you purchase product A, you are supporting that product, that business, the owners of that business, right? That is your purchase has impact, whether you think about it or not, right? So sometimes you can say that and you're like, ugh, it's too much work. Like, I can't be thinking about this every time I like go to the grocery store, every time I hire someone, or every time I buy a car, or like I have enough on my mind already.
mhm.
Fine. But it is a way, if you want to make impact in your daily life, every dollar you spend has an impact, good or bad, in alignment with your values or not in alignment with your values.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we're doing in our business is we are really trying to provide, we believe that we provide the best legal support, period, for founder led companies and funds, regardless of equity, doesn't matter. We provide it in a way that's uniquely helpful to people, in that we make sure that everyone understands decisions they're making. We'll talk about ownership, right? Maintaining ownership.
Yeah.
But what we're doing too is we're really going out there and saying, women, we want to work with you. We want to support you. You will feel comfortable and safe in this space of us. We will not talk down to you. We will bring you into our community. We will introduce you to your peers. So we are doing our part to support the women who are out there changing this conversation. And the men too, the men who are out there with the same value alignment, who are changing this conversation in terms of who's managing money and who's receiving money. And then the other thing we're doing is that we do direct advocacy. So going on podcasts like this and being able to share some of this data and just, bringing it to light for just a few more people of this is something that's going on in our country and that really matters and that we just don't talk about that much, right?
Yeah.
It matters and we just don't talk about that much. So we're also getting involved on the policy front. So we have a policy paper going on right now specifically directed to state and federal policy that can change a little bit of the conversation around how to access this sort of capital in a way that will make it more accessible to everyone, right? More accessible to everyone. It shouldn't only be going to women. We're not saying that. We're saying it should be an equal playing field for everyone.
Yeah.
And who can't get behind that, right?
Right. No, I mean, literally, there's no way to disagree with that. And so where can, I have a couple more questions for you, but on this, where can people learn more about this? Do you have resources on your website, or is it best if they reach out to you?
We have resources on the website. So we keep like an updated kind of set of stats on the website about this stuff. And then we publish a blog. So that's all on the website too. And most of it relates to, some of it's just practical legal advice for you, but written in a way that's just a little more digestible and maybe a little more fun.
Yeah.
Some of them are about these specific things about policy that we're working on and places that those are changing. And I am an advocate for using, Chat GPT or Claude or whoever you use and just having a little conversation there. Hey, I'm thinking about this. Can you what are some data around this? Can you direct me to the sources on this? Who's talking about this? Who's writing about this? And that's a way that for me is easy, right? Yeah. Again, we all have so much to do. You can't put this huge, heavy burden on people saying, go out and educate yourself.
Yeah.
Go have a short conversation with AI about it.
Yeah.
And see where that takes you. See if it interests you.
Awesome. I love that. And I'll definitely put the link to your website in the show notes for everyone to go read your blog and find out more about that. One of the things that you mentioned is protecting your ownership, even when you have investors.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to share more about this too, because I think this is a piece where a lot of people are afraid to work with other people if they have to lose their say in their business. I mean, our businesses are our babies, right? And so
Yes.
how do we protect our ownership through this?
One of the things that we've seen, or we've seen some horror stories about women who have started businesses that have become incredibly successful. They've raised a lot of money, they've sold that business, and by the time they've sold it, they have a tiny ownership stake left. And this happens more frequently to women than to men because women are expected to give up more ownership in their company when they raise money. That is just how it works, unfortunately. That is, yes.
You're really blowing my mind with all of this.
Man, it's such a bummer, but it's good to know.
It is. It really is.
And then other things start to make a little more sense. You're like, oh, I get why. I mean, money is so powerful. If you have a small group controlling money, then it's, how does money affect this? For better or worse, this country is deeply affected by, it's a capitalist economy.
Yep.
So people who have money have a lot more influence in this country than people who don't have money.
Yes.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
But that is the system we have, and it's unlikely to change anytime soon. And your question was about ownership. Okay.
Yeah, ownership.
Yeah. So the two things that really matter when you're bringing in outside money, particularly equity investors. So like I said, you go to the bank, get a loan, they don't own anything. As long as you pay the money back, your company's still 100% yours. You raise money from, say, a venture capital fund or an angel investor, right? Somebody who's giving you money in exchange for ownership of your company. The two things that matter are your actual ownership stake and your control. And they aren't always the same thing because you could own 25% of your company. Let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg, right?
Yes.
Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook, brought in tons of money, but for a while, and it may still be the case, he had these things called super voting shares, where his voting shares had 10 votes a share.
Mm.
I think this is right. I could be
Okay.
getting the numbers a little wrong, but 10 votes per share. So he might be a minority owner in his company, but he still has control.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. It's like, how much control do you have based on the number of shares you own in your company? So always keeping that in mind when you bring on other investors. How is this going to impact my ownership? How do I maintain control of my company on the share front? What decisions are decided by shareholders? So you want to understand these things. And again, this sounds like gibberish, right? To a lot of people you're listening right now, you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Totally normal. But before you bring on investors, these are things that you will want to understand. So when you understand that from your lawyer, you understand that from your peers, your friends, right? So that's one thing, is how much you own. The other thing is your board of directors. So a lot of us have boards, but they're advisors, advisory boards, right? These are just people who are there to support us, give us guidance, maybe make introductions for us. That's great, but they don't have any say in the business. Separate is your board of directors. So this is when you are a corporation, you are required to have a board of directors. And this is a group of 1, 3, 5, 7, 15 people. And that board of directors is actually the primary decision-making entity for your company. So you'll hear some stories too about people where the board removed the founder, right? You're like, okay, the founder started this business, they're running it. The board removed the founder.
Oh.
And this happens sometimes when venture capital gets involved. They decide the founder's not the right person to run the business anymore, which is sometimes true. But a
Yeah.
lot of times that founder didn't even know that was a possibility
Yeah.
because
Right.
they
'Cause
didn't
why would you?
understand. Right. Well, because you signed documents though
Mhm.
that gave them this authority, and you didn't know that that was a possibility because you didn't read the documents and have someone walk you through them and say, this is the implication of this provision. Know this before you decide, before you create this board that can actually kick you out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about, like, not to be the lawyer, but making sure you really truly understand the documents you're signing,
Yeah.
particularly when before you bring on investors.
Yeah, definitely. And that's probably why your clients work with you, because then you can read the details and let them know if it's a good decision.
Yeah, I mean, if we put it on you and we're like, okay, it's your job to read and understand these documents.
Right.
You're like, I'm not a lawyer. Some of this makes
Yeah.
sense. It's
Yeah.
plain English, but some of it really is not.
Right.
And maybe things don't flag for you the way they would for me because we have different backgrounds and training.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah.
No, I could talk to you about this all day. I have so many
I
questions for you, but I know we're almost out of time,
know.
so I just have a few more questions. How can people work with you? How can people connect with you? And like, what's the best way for them to get more resources about you and your team?
That we try to make it really easy. So you can actually go right on our website, which is just all-places.com.
Hmm.
And if you scroll down, there is a link there where you can click and set up a call with us.
Awesome.
So we
Perfect.
try to make it very easy. So so that's one way. Another way is to get a sense of who we are, who we work with, what types of services we provide. So you can get a sense ahead of time whether or not we might be a good fit for you because we're not a good fit for everybody.
Mhm.
And again, on the website, we try to make it really simple so we can lay out the types of companies we work with. There's a whole page about our clients. So you'll get a sense of the types of companies who are our existing clients. And then, like I said, I think our blog is really excellent. Signing up for our newsletter is just once a week, and we provide great content that's really tailored to this community of entrepreneurs and fund managers who care about their businesses and who care about gender equity.
Awesome. I'll put all of those links in the show notes. And before we get into your action steps of the week, is there anything else you want to talk about? I know we didn't get to talk about fundraising, which I'll have to have you back on to talk more about that. But is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, this has been so great.
Yeah, yeah. And so for anyone who is listening and wants to learn more, definitely go reach out. I'll put the link in the show notes for you to reach out and, connect with you and your team because there's a lot that goes into this. And like I said, you're blowing my mind with
Oh, thank
these
you.
stats.
I
It's
mean, that's
crazy.
good and bad to hear, but yeah.
I know. It's like
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful that I'm able to have you on this platform to educate more people on this, and I'm
I
grateful
mean,
that you're taking the time for doing this because this is important.
well, thank you for inviting me on and giving me an opportunity to talk about these things that really, that really matter to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, one last question. This is the way that I
Okay.
end every episode is I'd love it if you could share 3 action steps for the audience to take to move forward with this conversation. So, as you know, there's a lot of podcasts out there and we all listen to a ton and it's easy to just keep consuming and not taking action. So, I'd love it for you to challenge the audience with 3 things.
I love that you do this.
Oh, thank you.
I love that you do this. So let me try and come up with things that are really manageable.
Okay.
I'd say one thing which I thought of from our conversation is next time you go to the grocery store and you're going to buy a product, well, go ahead and buy it and then take 5 minutes to find out a little bit more about that company.
Mm-hmm.
Again, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you're using, Google, just type it in, spend 5 minutes, learn a little bit more about the company, right? What are they about? Who are their owners? Like, who founded them? Just learn a little bit more. Maybe it'll affect your decision about whether you buy the product again or not. Who knows? But I think it's interesting to start thinking about it. So that would be one. Another one would be there is always more clarity you can get on the value your business is providing. Always. And one of the best ways to do that is have a conversation with one of your customers or potential customers. Who are you targeting with your product? Have a conversation with that one of those people who will be honest with you and say, what do you think about this product? Is this valuable to you? Tell me what is, tell me what isn't. Because most of us, this is so interesting. So we're actually just about to start working with a strategic marketing agency
Mm-hmm.
on something very specific. But one of the things that she said during one of our intro calls was, if you go and talk to your customers about why they hired you, I bet they'll tell you some things that are surprising.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you got to talk to the customers.
Yes.
You've got to talk to the customers. And the third thing I would say, think about a business book you've heard about. Somebody's told you, oh, you should read this. This one's so great. And go buy it and read it.
That's a great one.
And I'm not going to tell you which ones to buy because there's something valuable in most of the ones, right, that you're going to pick up or read. And there'll be maybe one little piece that sticks with you. But one thing I'm thinking more about recently is how to allow more space in my work life
Yeah.
for creative thinking. And one thing that really is helpful for me in that is reading.
Hmm. I love audiobooks. I've been getting so into audiobooks
Great.
lately.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, those are great, great steps. I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the work you're doing, specifically bringing people's voices out on your podcast, supporting them as they launch their own podcast. It's so valuable. And I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.